Captain Jake Morrison stared at the view screen as his ship moved through empty space. The U's horizon was 3 weeks away from Earth, heading toward a star system that had been sending strange signals. Jake had been a space captain for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this before. "Captain, we're getting close to the Kepler 442 system," said Ben Carter from his seat at the communications station. Ben was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and nervous eyes. He had been listening to the signals for months now, trying to understand what they meant. "What do the signals say?" Jake asked, walking over to look at Ben's screen. "That's the problem, sir. They don't say anything anymore." 3 months ago, they were sending messages in the Zilani language. Songs, poems, even children's stories. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. Now there's just ... nothing. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez looked up from her science station. She was a smart woman in her 40s, with gray hair and serious eyes. Captain, the Zilani, were known across the galaxy for being peaceful. They made beautiful art and spent their time thinking about big questions. They never hurt anyone. Amy Walsh, the ship's security chief, frowned. She was a tough woman with short red hair and scars on her hands from old fights. Maybe they had a war. Maybe their planet got hit by something from space. Jake nodded. "We'll find out soon enough. Ben, try sending them a message. Tell them we're from Earth and we want to help." Ben worked at his controls for several minutes. Then he shook his head. "No answer, Captain. I'm not even sure anyone is alive down there to hear us." 2 hours later, the Horizon entered the Kepler 442 system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The planet that had once been home to the Zilani people was covered in huge holes. Smoke was still rising from some of them. Pieces of broken buildings and ships floated in space around the planet. "My God," whispered Dr. Rodriguez. "What happened here?" Jake felt sick to his stomach. He had seen wars before, but this was different. This looked like someone had tried to destroy everything that had ever lived on this world. "Amy, take a team down to the planet. See if you can find any survivors." "Lisa, I want you to study those holes. Try to figure out what kind of weapons made them." Amy and her team took a small ship down to the planet's surface. When they came back 6 hours later, Amy's face was white as paper. "Captain, there's nobody left. Not a single Zilani alive anywhere we looked. But we found something else." She put a small device on the table in the ship's meeting room. "This is a Zilani recording device. It was buried under some rocks, so it didn't get destroyed." Connected the device to the ship's computer. Soon images appeared on the screen. They showed Zilani families in their homes, going about their daily lives. The Zilani looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large black eyes. Then the images changed. Huge black ships appeared in the sky above Zilani cities. The ships were bigger than anything Jake had ever seen, like flying mountains made of metal. "The date on this recording is 4 months ago," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. On the screen, they watched as bright beams of light shot down from the black ships. Where the light touched the ground, everything disappeared. Buildings, trees, people all turned to dust in seconds. The recording showed Zilani people running and screaming. Parents carried their children trying to find somewhere safe to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The black ships covered the entire planet. "Look at this part," Amy said, pointing to the screen. The image showed Zilani children being forced into large metal boxes by creatures in dark armor. The creatures looked like insects walking on 2 legs, with 4 arms and red eyes. "Who are they?" Jake asked. Dr. Rodriguez was working at her computer, comparing the images to files from Earth's database. "I think I know. These look like the Vorthon Collective. They're a group that lives far away from here, near the edge of the galaxy. But I thought they just fought other military groups, not peaceful people." On the screen, one of the Vorthon soldiers was talking to a camera. Dr. Rodriguez translated his words. "This world has been cleansed of inferior life forms. The Vorthon Collective will make the galaxy pure." The recording ended with images of the planet burning. The last thing they saw was a Zilani child reaching toward the camera before the screen. Went black dot. Nobody in the meeting room spoke for a way. Long time. Finally, Jake stood up. How many Zilani lived on this planet? About 2 billion, Dr. Rodriguez answered softly. And they're all dead? Every single one? Jake walked to the window and looked out at the destroyed planet. Ben, send a message to Earth. Tell them what we found here. Tell them the Vorthon Collective is killing entire planets full of people. What should we do now, Captain? Amy asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he turned back to his crew. We go home. Earth needs to know about this. If the Vorthon Collective is willing to kill 2 billion peaceful people just because they think they're inferior, then no one in the galaxy is safe. Dr. Rodriguez was still studying the data from the planet. Captain, I found something else. The Vorthon ships left tracking marks in space when they used their engines. I can follow their path. Where did they go? Toward the center of the galaxy. Toward Earth. Jake felt his blood turn cold. How long ago did they leave? Based on the engine traces, about 3 months ago. And how long would it take them to reach Earth? Dr. Rodriguez worked on her computer for several minutes. When she looked up, her face was full of fear. If they're traveling at normal speed and stopping at other planets along the way, maybe 2 years. If they're going straight to Earth without stopping, maybe 18 months. Jake looked around at his crew. Ben was staring at the floor. Amy was checking her weapons. Dr. Rodriguez was still looking at her computer screen, hoping she had made a mistake. Set course for Earth, Jake said. Maximum speed. We need to warn them what's coming. As the horizon turned away from the dead. Planet Jake couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. 2 billion people, all dead in a few hours. Children taken from their parents. An entire civilization erased from existence just because someone thought they were inferior, he wondered. If Earth would be ready for what was coming, he wondered if anyone could be ready for enemies who saw genocide not as a terrible crime, but as a simple cleaning job. The horizon jumped into faster-than-light travel, racing toward home with the worst news in human history. 3 weeks had passed since the horizon returned to Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the back of the United Earth Council chamber, watching as President Helen Davis walked to the speaking platform. The large room was filled with representatives. From every nation and colony in human space, nobody spoke. Everyone knew this meeting would change everything. President Davis was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and tired eyes. She had been Earth's leader for 8 years, dealing with problems like trade disputes and mining rights. Today she had to tell humanity about something far worse. Members of the council, she began, her voice carrying across the silent room. 3 weeks ago, the exploration ship Horizon made a discovery that threatens every living being in our galaxy. She pressed a button, and the large screen behind her showed images from the dead Zilani world. Council members gasped as they saw the massive holes in the ground and the floating debris in space. The Zilani civilization is gone, President Davis continued. 2 billion people were killed in less than 6 hours by a group called the Vorthon Collective. This is not the first world they have destroyed. Admiral Frank Pierce stepped forward. He was a big man with gray hair and a deep voice, who had commanded Earth's space fleet for 20 years. Madame President, our intelligence teams have found evidence of 16 other worlds that suffered the same fate. The Vorthon Collective has killed over 50 billion beings in the past 2 years. The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. Some representatives stood up, shouting questions. Others sat in stunned silence. President Davis waited for quiet before continuing. The Vorthon Collective views this as pest control, she said. They have sent messages to other civilizations explaining their actions. They believe most species in the galaxy are inferior and should be eliminated. They keep some beings as slaves, but only if they are useful. Everyone else dies. Dr. Alan Webb, a thin man with thick glasses who ran Earth's Strategic Institute, approached the platform. We have intercepted Vorthon communications, he said. They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners except for experiments. They do not show mercy. Species are either useful to them or they are killed. There is no middle ground. Counselor Maria Santos from the South American Federation stood up. She was a small woman with dark hair who had always spoken for peace. Surely we can reason with them. Every intelligent species can be talked to. We can offer them something they want. Dr. Webb shook his head sadly. Counselor Santos, we tried. 2 months ago, we sent a diplomatic message to the Vorthan home system. We offered them trade, technology, even territory. Their response was simple. Surrender unconditionally and become slaves, or be destroyed. Those were the only choices they gave us. General Kate Murphy, the head of Earth's ground forces, stood at her seat. She was a tough woman with short black hair and scars on her neck from old battles. How long do we have? Admiral Pierce looked at his notes. Based on the path their ships took when they left the Zilani system, and assuming they stopped to destroy other worlds along the way, we estimate 18 months before they reach Earth. What are our chances in a fight? Asked Counselor James Park from the Asian Alliance. Honestly, almost none, Admiral Pierce replied. Our best ships carry weapons that can destroy a city. Their smallest ships can destroy continents. They have over 10,000 warships. We have 300. Their technology is 50 years ahead of ours, maybe more. The council chamber fell silent again. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Humanity was about to be wiped out, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. President Davis stepped forward again. There is one option. It is terrible, and many of you will not want to hear it. But it might be our only chance to survive. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. We have a secret project called Nightfall. We developed it 10 years ago in case we ever faced complete extinction. It has never been used because it requires us to give up everything that makes us human. Dr. Webb activated another screen. This one showed plans for weapons that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. Project Nightfall would turn every human world into a military base. Every person would become a soldier. We would build weapons that are banned by every treaty in the galaxy. We would use diseases, poisons, and machines that think for themselves. Counselor. Santos looked horrified. You're talking about becoming monsters? Yes, President Davis said simply. We would stop being a civilization. We would become something designed only for war. Our children would be raised as killers. Our scientists would create only weapons. Our artists would make only propaganda. Everything beautiful about humanity would be sacrificed. General Murphy spoke from her seat. Would it work? Maybe Dr. Webb answered. Aye. The Vorthan Collective has never fought an enemy that was willing to give up everything for victory. They expect their enemies to try to save their families, their homes, their way of life. They don't expect an enemy that has already thrown all of that away. Admiral Pierce added, we would also have the element of surprise. They think they know what humans are like based on our peaceful expansion into space. They don't know what we're capable of when we're desperate. Captain Morrison remembered something from the Zilani recordings. He stood up in the back of the room. President Davis, may I speak? She nodded. Captain Morrison discovered the Zilani genocide. I think we should hear what he has to say. Jake walked to the front of the room. I saw what the Vorthan Collective did to the Zilani children. They didn't just kill them quickly. They took them away from their parents first. They wanted the parents to suffer before they died. These aren't soldiers fighting a war. They're something else. Something that enjoys causing pain. He paused, looking around the room. I've been thinking about this for 3 weeks. If we fight them the normal way, we lose and everyone dies. If we surrender, we become slaves and watch our word. Children grow up in cages. But if we choose Project Nightfall, at least something survives. Maybe not humanity as we know it, but something that can make sure this never happens to anyone else. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some council members argued for immediate surrender, hoping the Vorthan Collective might show mercy. Others wanted to fight a traditional war, even knowing they would lose. A few suggested running away to another galaxy, abandoning Earth and the colonies. But more and more representatives began to see that Project Nightfall might be their only real choice. If they were going to die anyway, at least they could make their deaths mean something. When the vote finally came, The chamber was deadly quiet. President Davis called for all those in favor of Project Nightfall to stand. Slowly, representatives began to rise from their seats. 847 stood up. 721 remained. Seated, President Davis closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were hard as steel. Motion passes. Project Nightfall is approved. She walked to the communication console at the front of the room. Every screen in human space would carry her next words. Every person in every colony would hear what she had to say. Citizens of Earth and all human worlds, she began. As of this moment, human civilization is suspended. We are no longer bound by treaties, laws, or moral constraints. We have become a species at war with the very concept of genocide. We will not negotiate. We will not surrender. We will not show mercy. When the Vorthan Collective arrives, they will not find the peaceful humans they expect. They will find something new, something terrible, something that will make sure no one else ever suffers what we have seen. She paused, letting her words sink in across human space. Killed to our enemies. Whenever you arrive, know this. You have made genocide your way of life. We have made destroying you ours. There'll be no more civilization here, only war. The transmission ended. In the council chamber, nobody moved. They had just voted to destroy everything they had built over centuries. But they had also voted to make sure the galaxy would never again face the horror they had witnessed on the Zalani world. Project Nightfall had begun. 6 months had passed since the vote for Project Nightfall. Captain Jake Morrison walked through what used to be downtown Denver, but he barely recognized the place where he had grown up. The beautiful parks were gone, replaced by weapons factories. The museums and theaters had been torn down to make room for military training centers. Even the schools looked different now. Jake stopped in front of a building that used to be an elementary school. Through the windows, he could see children who looked too serious for their age. They were not learning about history or science anymore. Instead, they were studying how to fight, how to use weapons, and how to hate their enemies. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez appeared beside him. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, with new lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her hair. It's hard to watch, isn't it? She said quietly. These kids don't even know what childhood used to be like, Jake replied. They think learning to kill is normal. Lisa nodded sadly. Come on, President Davis wants to see us. She's reviewing the progress reports. They walked to the building that used to be the Denver Art Museum. Now it served as a regional command center for Project Nightfall. Inside, the walls were covered with maps, weapon designs, and production schedules instead of paintings. President Davis stood in the main room, looking at a huge screen that showed reports from around the world. She had changed too.
Her hair
Was completely gray now, and she wore a military uniform instead of civilian clothes. Dark circles under her eyes showed she rarely slept. Jake, Lisa, she said without turning around. Look at these numbers. We've built more weapons than we made in the previous 50 years. We've converted 70% of our cities into military bases. We've recruited every person over the age of 15 into some kind of military service. General Kate Murphy walked over to join them. She now wore the insignia of Supreme Military Commander, the highest rank in the new human military structure. The civilian population has been reduced to 12%, she reported. Everyone else is either a soldier, a weapons maker, or a researcher working on military projects. Dr. Alan Webb approached the group, carrying a thick folder of documents. He looked pleased with himself, which made Jake uncomfortable. The psychological conditioning programs are working better than we hoped, he said. The new generation of children show almost no emotional response to violence. They see destroying enemies as simply solving problems. What about the adults? President Davis asked. More difficult but manageable, Webb replied. We've used a combination of drugs, hypnosis, and training to suppress empathy in about 60% of the population. The others we keep in support. Roles where emotional attachment might actually be useful. Jake felt sick listening to this. You're talking about changing what makes people human? Webb looked at him with cold eyes. Captain Morrison, humans are emotional creatures who care about their families and try to avoid hurting others. Traits make us weak against an enemy like the Vorthon Collective. We need to become something else, something that can do what needs to be done. Admiral Frank Pierce entered the room, his uniform now bearing the marks of the Space War Command. The fleet construction is ahead of schedule, he announced. We've scrapped all our old exploration ships and passenger vessels. Metal in human space is being turned into warships. What about the colonists? Jake asked. Where are the families supposed to live? Underground, General Murphy answered simply. We've built massive bunker cities on 47 worlds. The surface of every human planet is now dedicated to military production. Families live in the bunkers and work in the factories. President Davis turned to face the group. Show them the new ships, Admiral. Pierce activated a wall screen that displayed images of the new human fleet. Jake stared in horror at what he saw. The ships looked nothing like the elegant vessels he had served. They were ugly, brutal machines covered in weapons. Had no windows, no comfortable quarters, no areas for relaxation or art. Each ship carries enough firepower to destroy a moon, Pierce explained proudly. The crews live in tiny spaces, with only basic life support. Every inch of space is devoted to weapons, engines, or ammunition. The crews must hate living in those conditions, Jake said. They don't hate anything, Webb replied. The psychological conditioning removes their ability to feel discomfort about their living conditions. They only care about completing their mission. Dr. Rodriguez had been quiet during this discussion, but now she spoke up. I need to show you something from my research division. She led them to another room where scientists in white coats were working with materials Jake didn't recognize. We've developed biological weapons that target specific alien genetics, she explained. We can create diseases that will kill Vorthons, but leave other species completely unharmed. We've also made chemical weapons that attack their nervous systems. That's against every treaty humans have ever signed, Jake protested. There are no more treaties, President Davis said firmly. There are no more laws except one. Destroy the Vorthon Collective completely. Lisa showed them another project. We've also created self-replicating war machines. They're like tiny robots that can build copies of themselves using any available metal. Once we release them on a Vorthon world, they'll consume everything technological and turn it into more weapons. Jake walked to a window and looked out at the city. In the distance, he could see massive construction projects where new weapons were being built. The sky was dark with smoke from the factories. There were no birds anymore. They had all been driven away by the noise and pollution. Have we become? He asked quietly. General Murphy joined him at the window. We've become what we need to be, she said. The Vorthon Collective expects to find a civilization that values art, music, and philosophy. They expect people who will try to protect their children and preserve their culture. They don't expect to find beings who have given up everything, except the desire to kill. President Davis walked over to them. Jake, I know this is hard, but remember what you saw in the Zilani world. Remember those children being taken from their parents? If we had not changed, the same thing would happen. 2 human children in 12 months? At least those Zilani children knew what love felt like before they died, Jake replied. Our children will never know. They'll live their entire lives without understanding, compassion, creativity, or joy. But they'll live, President Davis said, and more importantly, they'll make sure no other species ever faces genocide again. Dr. Webb showed them reports from the intelligence division. We've been monitoring Vorthon communications. They're still 18 months away from Earth, just as we predicted. They're destroying 2 more civilizations along their path. The Kepler 186 system fell last month. The Gliese 667 system will probably be attacked next week. How many people? Jake asked. About 8 billion combined. Webb answered without emotion. Jake closed his eyes. 8 billion more beings dead while humanity prepared for war. 8 billion who might have been saved if humans had found another way. There was no other way, President Davis said, as if reading his thoughts. We tried diplomacy, we offered trade and alliance. They responded with demands for total surrender. This is the only path that gives us any chance of survival. As the meeting ended, Jake walked through the city back to his apartment. It was smaller now. Everyone had been moved. 2 smaller spaces to make room for military facilities. On the way, he passed a group of teenagers practicing combat moves. They moved with deadly precision, but their faces showed no joy or excitement. It looked like machines shaped like people. In his apartment, Jake found a letter that had been delivered while he was at the meeting. It was from his sister, who lived on Mars. She wrote about how different everything was now. Her children, who used to love painting and music, now spent their days learning to maintain weapons. Her husband, who had been a teacher, now worked in a factory making explosives. At the end of the letter, she asked the same question Jake had been asking himself. Will we still be human when this is over? Jake put the letter down and looked. Out his window at the city, in the distance, he could see construction lights working through the night. Building more weapons, more ships, more tools of war. Humanity was becoming the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever seen. In 12 months, when the Vorthon Collective arrived, they would not find the peaceful species they expected. They would find something that had sacrificed its soul to become. The perfect instrument of revenge. The only question was whether anything worth saving would survive the war. 2 years had passed since humanity chose to abandon civilization. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the command deck of the war vessel Death's Edge, looking at reports from across human space. Everything was ready. Every weapon had been built. Every soldier had been trained. Every human world had been turned into a fortress of war. Jake hardly recognized himself anymore. The man who had once explored space searching for new friends among the stars was gone. In his place stood someone who thought only about destroying enemies. The psychological conditioning had worked on him too, though he sometimes still remembered what he used to feel like. The Death's Edge was one of 5,000 ships hiding throughout the solar system. Each ship was designed for one purpose: killing. Vorthons, they had no art, no music, no comfortable places to rest. Every surface was covered with weapons or armor. The crew of 300 lived in spaces smaller than closets, but they didn't complain. They couldn't complain. The conditioning had removed their ability to feel uncomfortable. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, now called Director of Alien Elimination, approached Jake's command station. She looked completely different from the scientist who had once studied peaceful alien cultures. Her eyes were cold and empty. Her voice never showed emotion. The biological weapons are loaded on all ships, she reported. We have 17 different diseases ready to deploy. Each one targets Vorthon genetics specifically. None will harm other alien species we might encounter. How effective will they be? Jake asked. The laboratory tests show a 94% kill rate within 6 hours of exposure, Lisa replied. The remaining 6% will be too sick to fight effectively. Jake nodded. 2 years ago, the thought of creating diseases to kill entire populations would have horrified him. Now, it was just another tool to complete the mission. Ben Carter, the head of intelligence operations, walked over with a datapad. His young face had become hard and emotionless. Got 'em all. We've detected the Vorthon fleet. They're 3 days away from Earth. How many ships? Jake asked. Exactly what we expected. 10,000 vessels, ranging from small fighters to massive planet killers. Their largest ships are the size of cities. General Kate Murphy's voice came through the communication system from her command post on the moon. All human forces are in position. Ground batteries are ready. Orbital defense platforms are online. The fleet is hidden and waiting for your signal. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy. For 2 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They had given up everything they were to become something that could win this war. Amy Walsh, now commanding the Special Operations Division, appeared on the main screen from her ship near Jupiter. Admiral, my teams have confirmed that the Vorthons are not expecting resistance. Their communications suggest they think Earth has fallen into chaos and will surrender. Easily. Perfect, Jake replied. They're about to learn what humans become when we decide to stop being human. Dr. Alan Webb, broadcasting from his Psychological Warfare Center, added his report. The mind disruption signals are ready to transmit. Studied Vorthon brain patterns from captured communications. Our signals will cause fear, confusion, and despair in their crews. Jake remembered the Zilani children being dragged away by Vorthon soldiers. He remembered their parents screaming. He remembered the peaceful civilization that had been erased in 6 hours. That memory was one of the few emotions the conditioning had left him with. Hatred for those who committed genocide. "Director Rodriguez," he said, "remind me what we found in our intelligence about Vorthan society." Lisa consulted her files. Vorthan Collective has destroyed 43 civilizations in the past 5 years. They keep detailed records of each genocide, treating it like a business operation. They have special facilities where they torture captured beings before killing them. It's not for information, but for entertainment. And their attitude toward other species. They classify all non-Vorthan life as either useful slaves or waste to be eliminated. They have never shown mercy, never accepted surrender, and never allowed any survivors to escape. Complete extermination is their standard procedure. Jake felt the cold satisfaction that had replaced all his other emotions. Then they'll understand what we're about to do to them. The 3 days passed quickly. Human ships remained hidden behind planets, moons, and asteroids throughout the solar system. The crews sat in silent readiness, waiting for the moment they had trained for their entire lives. On the 3rd day, the Vorthan fleet entered the solar system. They moved in perfect formation, confident that they were approaching another helpless civilization. Their communications, intercepted by human intelligence, were casual and relaxed. Ben Carter reported the enemy transmissions. They're discussing how to divide up human territory after the conquest. They've already assigned which planets will become slave farms and which will be strip mined for resources. They're not even considering that we might fight back, Amy Walsh observed from her position. Why would they? Jake replied. Every other species tried to protect their families and preserve their culture. We're the first ones who threw all that away to become pure killers. The Vorthan fleet approached Earth in a standard genocide formation, designed to surround the planet and eliminate all life systematically. Their largest ships moved to positions where they could begin the planetary bombardment. Smaller vessels spread out to intercept any attempted escapes. Jake watched the tactical display as the enemy took their positions. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Today we end genocide forever. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far. All ships, attack now. 5,000 human warships suddenly appeared throughout the solar system, emerging from hiding places the Vorthans had never detected. The surprise was complete. The enemy had expected to find a frightened, desperate civilization trying to negotiate for mercy. Instead, they found something that had been waiting patiently for them to arrive. The first wave of human attacks was devastating. Ships that had been designed only for killing unleashed weapons the galaxy had never seen before. Vorthan vessels that had destroyed entire worlds found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy that fought with no concern for their own survival. Jake watched as human ships rammed directly into Vorthan vessels, exploding with nuclear force. The conditioning had removed the crew's fear of death, making them perfect weapons. Other human ships released clouds of self-replicating hunter robots that tore apart enemy vessels from the inside. Director Rodriguez, deploy the biological weapons, Jake ordered. Lisa activated the disease deployment systems. Invisible clouds of death spread through space, seeking Vorthan ships. Within minutes, enemy communications began reporting mysterious illnesses spreading through their crews. Dr. Webb launched his psychological warfare attacks. Vorthan commanders who had spent years calmly ordering genocides suddenly found themselves paralyzed by terror and despair as human signals attacked. Their minds, the battle that the Vorthans had expected to be a simple extermination, became a nightmare. They were fighting an enemy that had no weaknesses they understood. Humans didn't try to protect their families because they had no families anymore. They didn't try to preserve their culture because they had destroyed it themselves. They didn't feared death because they had already given up everything that made life worth living. Admiral Pierce's voice came through the communications network from his position near Mars. Enemy fleet is breaking formation. They're trying to retreat. Negative, Jake replied coldly. Let none escape. Every ship that participated in genocide dies here. This was the moment humanity had prepared for. They had discovered that the Vorthons had seeded all the major hyperspace routes with automated tracking stations, intended to hunt down any survivors from the civilizations they destroyed. But human intelligence had found those stations and turned them into traps, Amy Walsh reported from her Special Operations Command. All hyperspace routes are blocked. We've been preparing for 2 years. Every possible escape path has hunter-killer stations waiting for them. Jake felt the cold satisfaction growing stronger. Begin Phase 2. Transmit our message to every civilization in the galaxy. Ben Carter activated the long-range communication system. Jake's voice was broadcast across thousands of light years, reaching every intelligent species in known space. This is humanity, Jake's emotionless voice announced. We have engaged the Vorthon Collective in battle above Earth. We are not fighting as heroes. We are not fighting to preserve our civilization. We became monsters to destroy monsters. Sacrificed everything we were to ensure genocide ends forever. The message continued as human ships systematically destroyed every Vorthon vessel. Do not thank us. Do not honor us. We're no longer the species you might have known as friends. We are something else now. Something that exists only to eliminate those who commit genocide. As the last Vorthon ships were destroyed, Jake prepared to give the final order. Intelligence reports confirmed that Vorthon worlds, military bases, and colonies throughout the galaxy were undefended. The entire Vorthon military had come to Earth, expecting an easy victory. All fleets prepare for galaxy-wide assault, Jake announced. Phase 3 begins now. 6 months after the battle at Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the Death's Edge, reading the final reports. The war was over. The Vorthon Collective no longer existed. Every ship, every base, every world that had belonged to them was now silent space dust. The numbers on his screen told the story of complete extinction. 47 Vorthon worlds had been attacked simultaneously by human fleets. Each planet's population of billions had been eliminated in hours. Using the biological weapons Dr. Rodriguez had created, the diseases worked exactly as designed. Killing only Vorthons, while leaving other alien slaves unharmed? Ben Carter approached with the communication logs. His face showed no emotion as he reported. Admiral, we've received responses from civilizations across the galaxy. They're asking what we plan to do now that the Vorthons are gone. Jake looked at the messages on his screen. The Centauri Republic wanted to establish trade relations. The Andorian Federation offered to share technology. The crystal beings of Vega asked if humanity needed anything. They still don't understand, Jake said quietly. They think we're the same species that left Earth 200 years ago to explore space peacefully. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez entered the command center, carrying datapads filled with research reports. Admiral, I've completed the analysis of all Vorthon technology and records. We've learned something interesting about their history. What did you find? Jake asked. The Vorthons weren't always genocidal killers, Lisa explained. 500 years ago, they were attacked by another species that tried to wipe them out. The Vorthons survived, but the experience changed them. They decided to become killers, so no one could ever threaten them again. Jake thought about this information. So they became monsters to fight monsters, just like we did. The difference is that they never stopped, Lisa continued. After they destroyed their original enemies, they kept going. They decided that the only way to be completely safe was to kill everyone else in the galaxy who might someday become a threat. General Kate Murphy's voice came through the communication system from Earth. Admiral, we need to discuss what happens next. The galaxy is asking questions about our intentions. Jake activated the main screen to show Murphy's face. She looked older, with gray hair and lines around her eyes. What kind of questions? They want to know if we plan to take over Vorthon territory. They want to know if we'll help rebuild the civilizations that were destroyed. Most importantly, they want to know if we're going to turn into the next threat they have to worry about. Dr. Alan Webb appeared on another screen from his research station. I've been analyzing our psychological conditioning programs. The changes we made to ourselves are permanent. We can't just decide to become peaceful explorers again. What do you mean? Jake asked. Our brains have been altered, Webb explained. The parts that feel empathy, compassion, and creativity have been suppressed or removed entirely. We're not humans anymore. We're living weapons that look like humans. Amy Walsh joined the conversation from her ship near the destroyed Vorthan homeworld. I've been talking to the freed slaves from Vorthan worlds. They're grateful we saved them, but they're also terrified of us. They saw what we did to an entire species. Jake understood their fear. Humanity had committed genocide to prevent genocide. They had become exactly what they had set out to destroy, except they had been more efficient at it than the Vorthons ever were. Show me the casualty reports, Jake ordered. Ben Carter displayed the numbers on the main screen. In 6 months of war, humanity had killed every single Vorthan in the galaxy. It's not just soldiers, but civilians, children, and elderly. The biological weapons didn't care if a Vorthon was a warrior or a farmer. Everyone with Vorthon genetics had died. 6 billion Vorthons eliminated, Carter reported. 0 human casualties in the final phase of operations. 0 casualties because we stopped caring if we lived or died, Jake observed. Hard to kill someone who's already given up everything worth living for. President Helen Davis appeared. On the communication screen from Earth, she looked exhausted, older than her years. Jake, I need you to return to Earth. We have decisions to make about humanity's future. What decisions? Jake asked. The galaxy is different now, Davis replied. 43 civilizations that were destroyed by the Vorthons are gone forever. Their survivors are asking us to help them rebuild. Other species want to form alliances with us. They see us as the protectors who ended the age of genocide. But that's not what we are, Jake said. No, it's not, Davis agreed. We're something else entirely. The question is what we do with that. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in the ruins of what used to be the United Earth Council chamber. The building had been converted to a military command center during Project Nightfall. It still looked like a fortress instead of a place for peaceful discussion. President Davis addressed the gathering of human military leaders and scientists. We face a choice, she began. We can try to become the galaxy's protectors, using our power to prevent future genocides. Or we can withdraw from galactic civilization entirely, hiding on distant worlds where our presence won't threaten others. Admiral Pierce spoke first. We can't go back to being what we were. The conditioning is permanent. We don't feel compassion anymore. We don't create art or music or literature. We only know how to fight and kill, but we're very good at fighting. And killing, General Murphy added, maybe that's what the galaxy needs. Someone willing to do the terrible things necessary to stop evil. Dr. Webb had a different perspective. The problem is that we've become exactly like the Vorthons were. After their transformation, we destroyed our own humanity to become perfect killers. What happens when we decide some other species is a threat? Will we be able to stop ourselves from doing to them what we did to the Vorthons? Jake thought about the children he had seen. In the schools during Project Nightfall, they had grown up without love, without joy, without any understanding of what made life beautiful. They were efficient soldiers, but they weren't human in any meaningful way. There's a third option, Jake said finally. We've proven that genocide can be stopped, but only by something willing to become worse than the genocidal killers themselves. Maybe our role is to be the galaxy's final weapon. Something kept hidden unless genocide threatens again. President Davis nodded slowly. You're suggesting we become the thing that appears when all other options have failed. Exactly, Jake replied. We withdraw from galactic civilization. We hide on worlds at the edge of known space. We monitor communications for signs of genocidal behavior. And if another species like the Vorthons appears, we destroy them completely before they can get started. Dr. Rodriguez looked troubled. That means living in isolation forever. It's never making friends with other species, never sharing knowledge or culture. We don't have culture anymore, Jake pointed out. We gave that up. All we have left is the ability to end civilizations when they become threats to others. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would withdraw from the galaxy, becoming silent guardians. Who watched for signs of genocide? They would make no contact with other species unless absolute necessity demanded it. Jake recorded the final message that would be broadcast to every civilization in the galaxy. This is humanity's final communication. We have eliminated the Vorthan Collective and the threat of systematic genocide. This victory came at the cost of our civilization, our culture, and our humanity itself. We are no longer the species you might have known. We have become something else. Something that exists only to prevent what the Vorthons represented. We are withdrawing from galactic civilization. Do not look for us. Do not try to contact us. But know that we are watching. If genocide ever threatens the galaxy again, we will appear. We will not negotiate. We will not show mercy. We will simply end the threat completely, as we ended the Vorthans live in peace, knowing that someone is willing to become a monster so that you never have to. Years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of a hidden base on a planet at the edge of the galaxy. Earth and the other human worlds were empty now. Their populations moved to secret locations where they could watch the galaxy without being seen. The other species had prospered in the peace that followed the Vorthons' destruction. They built new civilizations, created beautiful art, and explored the wonders of the universe. They did all the things humanity had given up the right to do. Sometimes Jake wondered if there had been another way. Maybe diplomacy could have worked. Maybe the Vorthians could have been reasoned with. Maybe humanity could have found a solution that didn't require becoming the very evil they sought to destroy. But when he looked at the reports of peaceful species exploring space without fear of genocide, he knew the price had been worth paying. Somewhere in the galaxy, children played without worrying that killers would come from the stars. Parents raised families without fear of systematic extermination. Civilizations grew and flourished because something terrible watched from the shadows. Ready to destroy anyone who threatened that peace? Humanity had announced that there would be no more civilization when genocide struck. They had kept that promise. And in keeping it, they had ensured that genocide itself would never again darken the stars.